Meh. Meh.
Is that what a sheep does?
Aren't they the same? Oh, no, goats, you know what they do is they scream like Taylor Swift. You know?
That's why goats are always associated with heavy metal.
And that is how you intro a live podcast. Fuck that. Women, don't wear the burqa simply because of sharks. Sharks are going to think you're a seal.
We want to posit a different kind of freedom. We don't know exactly what it is yet.
What up? We are Owls at Dawn. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied politics, philosophy, and religion around the world and decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. And this week we are doing it live here in the Santa Clarita Valley. I'm Austin Hayden Smith.
I'm Troy Polidori speaking from my couch.
All right, here we go. We are going to do our first ever live episode from Troy's little house pad thing in the valley where it is not over 100 degrees today.
It's not a valley though, bro. It's a desert for sure.
It's a desert. Yeah, definitely. I'm actually looking at a deserty mountain right now, but there's a little breeze going on, so I think we're going to survive. And this week, it is Troy's turn to blast some concept or some group of individuals or himself or some phobia or whatever it is that he feels like he wants to rant about for a minute or so. We're not too strict on the time.
This can take more than a minute.
It's okay. Well, fucking run it then, brother.
All right, so y'all may be aware we're recording on the weekend on Saturday, but when you're listening a week and a half ago or so, John Oliver engaged in one of his weekly destructions of whatever concepts or people that are very easy to make fun of and mock. I don't have a problem with John Oliver. He's a funny guy. I used to listen to his podcast back in the day, and it was funny. I loved him when he was on The Daily Show. I like his new show. I watch it every week. It's good. But I'm getting a little sick of this destruction stuff. Case in point, last weekend, charter schools. John Oliver decided to destroy charter schools. Now, I'm all for that. I am a teacher in public education. I don't like charter schools. They're the worst. They prey on children, and they prey on public schools, and they prey on urban environments that are heavily impoverished. All right, so my issue essentially is this. John Oliver and crew decided that their piece on charter schools would be about how some charter schools are bad apples, essentially. Right, did you watch this? Did you hear about this?
No, I did not.
Okay. The idea was that a lot of charter schools are not overseen or have the overseeing committees or whatever are not legitimate, that they're given too much freedom in certain areas, and so maybe they'll end up getting a bunch of students into the system and then closing down in the middle of the year. Some people will, the private education companies that are running or paid to run these schools end up embezzling money or using it for non-essential services or pocketing it or whatever. And that's fine. Like, obviously those things happen that are bad. And the thing is, everybody agrees those things are bad. Like, there is no charter advocate that's like, yeah, but I love it when someone embezzles money from public funds. That's wonderful.
Right.
So nobody disagrees about that. Any charter advocate can then just say, those are bad apples. We don't worry about them. Yeah, definitely don't let those things happen. Let the journalists take care of it or whatever. That never actually gets to the root of, well, what are charter schools and are they good as an educational innovation? That's the real question. And basically, they just said in the middle of it that they're not going to answer that question. They're not going to even try to delve into it. And that should be the entire root of the discussion. What is it about charter schools that are supposed to be better than public schools?
Freedom over curriculum.
Yeah. So they have less red tape when it comes to curriculum and in terms of state oversight or whatever. Innovation is the buzzword. Yep. They can have freedom to innovate, which basically means we don't have to hire unionized teachers, and we can make them teach to the test or fire them, and then have a union to back them for the most part. And so what else would you expect then to have great standardized test scores that may or may not actually end up with learning outcomes that are good for the students? So just look at the logic of it. I mean, yes, there's lots of statistics out there, and there are some that say that charters do better, and many that say that they don't. And you can basically find any evidence to sort of support any hypothesis because the data is very complicated, and there's selection bias everywhere.
Right.
Because you have poverty versus less poverty in certain areas and all this stuff. So it's so difficult to discern for these reasons. But if you just look at the basic logic of these things, it's the exact same stuff you hear amongst neoliberal circles. Free up people from regulation, and they will naturally innovate, and the market will dictate the best outcomes. That doesn't work. That doesn't happen. That's just ways for some people to cash out. And so, for me, obviously evidence is extremely important, and you want to look for that stuff. But you should be skeptical at the very beginning. The charter should have to prove and show what are the mechanisms that are actually causing better outcomes. Don't just show me the data. Show me what's causing the data and prove you're the reason it's happening. And I don't think that that's happening. And I think anybody who's a public school teacher, we're obviously biased because those are bad for us in situations. But they don't show that, right? They just show the short-term, quarter one data, which is what you do. And that just pisses me off. I want discussion about charter schools to be about the logic behind them, what's actually going to be producing better outcomes, right? Pitch me on how this is going to work before you're actually just going to say, let's just experiment. Let's have areas of experimentation with the lives of poor children. Charters can usually have higher expulsion rates than in public schools. So you got a bad student who's going to bring your standardized test scores down, kick them out. Or encourage their parents to leave. I think I read that, I think it was maybe Florida had 14 times students 14 times more students were expelled from charters than public schools. And where do those kids go when they get expelled from charters? To public schools. So then the public schools become the congregation of kids that have been cast out for everywhere else. So of course, then those schools are going to get worse.
Right.
So there's this give and take situation where it becomes very difficult to sort of divide the data in a way that's going to be helpful. So I know I don't sound as angry as I probably should, but we just ate a shitload of Chinese food, and I am lethargic as fuck right now.
That's anger. That's lethargic anger.
That's me full of MSG.
It's like a sloth angry. When a sloth
Exactly.
is angry, that's about how angry it gets.
When you poke at a sloth,
Yeah.
this is what he sounds like.
Or like a koala all high on eucalyptus.
Dude, koalas are angry as fuck, dude.
Except for when they're high.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm going eucalyptus.
Because they eat the eucalyptus. So Mandarin Wong is your eucalyptus. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. We should actually probably do a full episode on charter schools.
Yeah, or just talking about
Education.
education at the lower levels. So, we came from,
Yeah.
rather than what we actually necessarily have worked in the past 10
That's right.
years.
Well, my ex-girlfriend for a really long time, she is an early childhood interventionist. She's presently actually doing a PhD in Berkeley in this. And for a long time, she would share her research with me. And she was really interested in the Montessori models and the Rudolf Steiner Waldorf model, and then the Finnish model. And this was in 2010, before it became in fashion for people to talk about the Finnish school system.
Yeah.
And she did her whole master's dissertation on No Child Left Behind and the equivalent in Britain, which was called Every Child Matters, and the failure of standardized testing and the sort of top-down education models in favor of the Finnish Montessori and Waldorf/Rudolf Steiner models. It's really interesting stuff. I kind of got passionate actually about it for a while, and we, maybe in our naivete, but we actually wanted to start a charter school, and we were talking about this for like a long-term goal was to start a charter school because we were like, we could totally sort of go around the restrictions that the teachers' unions put on you, and we could create this crazy, artistic, free-flowing, bottom-up approach based on the Finnish models. And so for a while, I was kind of interested in doing that sort of thing.
Which is an idea that I love because you're talking about educational models that are based on research and how
Yes.
learning outcomes are achieved. And obviously the best thing would be to change the public schools from within.
Right.
But I wouldn't have a problem with a school trying to do something like that as a kind of experiment based on research. Most charters are not that, though, obviously.
Yeah.
Most of them are cash grabs for educational companies.
Right. Well, and
Or
after,
management companies, I should say.
Yeah, no, exactly. And actually, after she finished her master's degree, she went to go work for the Department of Education for a few years. I think she did. She worked, it wasn't actually the Department of Education. It was like the Department of Labor or something like that. But she was still working as in early childhood interventionist, and I think she got a little frustrated with the bureaucracy and the difficulty of actually trying to create any sort of reform. So she decided to go
basically
back.
impossible.
Yeah, exactly. So she decided to go back to academia, do a PhD.
Exactly. Yeah, where change is incredibly easy.
Yeah. So all right.
Oh, and can we add the Finnish model where private schools are illegal, I believe, right? And all teachers have master's degrees?
Yeah, all teachers
And
have
are
masters.
paid heavily? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's fucking just do that.
I feel like you're seeking your own self-interest.
Just a little bit. Did I mention that I'm biased? All right, so this week for our main segments, we're going to be talking about the controversial topic of the Burkini. Current debate right now in France and Germany is whether or not to ban it. I believe in many places in France it's currently banned.
Yep, in some of the towns, apparently it's a regional thing.
And there's debate about national bans.
Yes.
In Germany as well. This is a topic of consternation amongst Europeans in general.
Yes.
Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Austin, can you define what a Burkini is? Have you seen one in person?
In person, I have not.
No?
I've seen photos and videos.
Oh, okay. Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
We were talking, the hijab is the one you normally see in America. It's the scarf head covering. I don't know why I'm making a motion with my hands. But
I can see it.
Yeah, that's true.
I was at the beach yesterday, and I saw 3 or 4 Muslim women, and one had the full burqa, and the other 2 were just wearing jeans, a top, and a hijab. But I did not see a single burkini.
Yeah, it's not really an American thing, apparently. Yet, at least.
No. I kind of dig it, though. Like, style-wise, it's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah? The full-on... Oh, the burkini.
The
Okay.
burkini. Yeah.
Because most burkinis, unlike burqas cover your entire face and eyes.
With just the slit over the eyes?
Yeah, or like a mesh screen or something in front of
Oh,
it.
yeah, I've seen it. Okay.
Whereas the burkini, I believe most of the time your face is uncovered, but it's a full body and head covering.
Yeah. I just think they're kind of cool. They look very aerodynamic in the water.
I guess they could be functional in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Only thing, though, oh, shit. You would look more like a seal, though. Fuck that. Women, don't wear the burqa simply because of sharks. Sharks are going to think you're a seal. Seriously. You're going to look more like... You're going to cast a bigger shadow, and you're not going to have the same limbs because it's going to kind of be a little bit more flowy. You're going to look like a fucking seal.
You know what this is an analogy for? The good white liberals who are looking out for Muslim women's human rights.
That's right. That's exactly it.
Let me tell you, you think you want to wear this because it engenders religious devotion? I'm the good white liberal who knows better.
That's right. That's right. I'm looking out for your own safety.
You from sharks.
That's right. This is so subversive and disgusting. Can you imagine? That's going to be the narrative now. They're going to be like, listen, women, we don't want you to wear them. Not because of any sort of religious oppression. We're looking out for your own well-being. There are a lot of great white sharks in Australia and off the coast of California. And their main diet are seals. And when you wear a bikini, you're going to be seal. I bet you Breitbart is going to post some fucking article. You can watch. I'm predicting it right now. Pay attention. Someone is going to make this statement. They might do it now and then quote me. Do not quote me. Do not quote me. This is not Austin's. This is Troy Polidori speaking.
Irony alerts, right? This was not meant literally.
Yeah.
Can we add that how funny it is that at least I feel like this debate wouldn't be happening in America?
Well, why don't you think so?
I just feel as much as there is Islamophobia in America, certainly, and since there are fewer Muslims, it's going to be ebbs and flows to a much lesser degree than, say, in France and Germany, where it's an everyday thing. I mean, I've never seen a burqa in person.
Right.
Personally, I've seen hijabs everywhere, all the time, but never a burqa. That's a regular thing for many Europeans. I think that the idea of religious liberty in America is strong enough to where it would be kind of ridiculous to think you would ban religious clothing. I mean, we still have these questions like police officers who are Sikhs, can they wear turbans and stuff like that. But that never gets to the point of a national debate.
No, it doesn't, huh?
Ever.
Do you think, though, that it's also because we haven't really felt domestically threatened by Sharia law? Really? I mean, there's, Dearborn, Michigan, where there is a large Muslim community, and there was a few years ago, probably after 9/11, when there was a lot of like heightened concern. I mean, I guess there's still heightened concern, but it was extra heightened. But maybe it's just because we don't have any sort of material policies that would indicate that Sharia law is an actual thing, whereas it seems like at least there's more of a discussion in France.
Yeah, I mean, at least, at the very least, assimilation for Muslims in America just seems much easier.
It does, doesn't it?
And obviously
Yeah.
that comes from the fact that, our colonial activities in the Middle East and Persia and elsewhere don't come back to bite us because we're very far away.
Because we're at a distance, yeah.
Whereas when, people are fleeing Syria, they oftentimes, make it to France and Germany.
Mm-hmm.
They probably don't get all the way to America. I'm sure most who emigrate from the Middle East to America or have the means to do that
That's largely
are
true.
going to assimilate a lot easier.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, strangely, I think it's Wahhabism and Salafism and these really fundamentalist strains of Islam tend to not be the most religiously devout people, but usually the sort of poorer segments who may or may not really know correlation to being religiously devout, but they're prone towards these more fundamentalist tactics because there's not really much else to do with your life, less to lose.
Well, so is the Burkini, is this really a conservative thing, or is this, what's the deal? Like, I mean, obviously it's conservative covering, and so if you are religiously devout but yet you still want to go surf, you can cover up and stay authentic to your faith. Is that a conservative thing, or is it kind of more a fashion-y thing? I don't know.
I think we could probably all say that the burqa, the full body and head covering, is definitely a religiously devout thing.
Okay.
Now, I think that lots of women do buy fashionable burqas, and I know there's a market for them, and some are a lot made of nicer material and look better and whatnot. So certainly those things aren't mutually exclusive in any way. But it seems like the burkini, just by the name itself, you can tell is more of a fashion thing than anything else. And so the debate surrounding it is fascinating, especially for outsiders like us.
Right.
I'm sure it's terrible for people I think some people have been told by police to strip out of their bikinis.
That happened on the
public.
beach near Nice the other day.
That's incredible. I
Yeah.
can't even believe that's happening. Men, in the name of liberty, are forcing somebody to strip off their clothes
Yeah,
in
I think it was
public.
cops too. Like literally, it wasn't like vigilante justice or something like that. Where it was a group of people that were like, "Hey, we think that you should, not do that at the beach or something." I don't know why that would make it any better necessarily, but it definitely makes it different. But this was literally police force that came to this woman. It was like 6 of them, according to the pictures, on the beach that walked up to this woman and were kind of like, "Hey, you got to take your shit off.
That's incredible.
Show your skin."
I can't believe that.
Yeah.
I don't even know what I'd do if I was watching that happen in person.
So that's all in the name of liberalism, right?
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so what is the reasoning for outlying burqas? Because there seems to be 2 general reasons given for this policy. One is the fear of fundamentalism and extremism. So
Right.
the burqa anonymizes your identity. We don't know who you are. We can't see your face. You could be hiding anything under there. It could be dangerous.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of ridiculous, but let's just table that for now.
Right.
Second is the liberatory, altruistic reason.
Right.
We want to liberate and free Muslim women who are being forced to wear this burqa, and no sane person in their right mind would ever choose to wear this clothing, since it literally looks like you're being sort of shackled,
Sure.
imprisoned. And for us, if that was happening to me, I would feel imprisoned, so you must feel the same way.
Right.
I want to liberate you. You can't do it yourself. Even if you think you're doing it for religious reasons, you're not. You've been inculcated into a system where you're made to believe it's good for you to give up your freedom, right? It's
Okay.
like it'd be analogous to like the slave who wants his slavery because he feels like he couldn't
Sure.
do anything if he was free. He wouldn't know what to do,
Right.
whatever. It's just a stereotype. And both of those seem incredibly, obviously, problematic and false, but they also are kind of a contradiction, right? I mean, are they dangerous, or are they not dangerous and you're trying to free women from them because they're oppressive?
Well, I think it's 2 different strands of people, right? So you've got one grouping of people that are maybe more geared towards what we would call Islamophobic, right? And they're going to be the ones that are going to be afraid that they're hiding bombs, or that they're a fugitive on the run, or something like that. And so they're going to use that logic. Whereas there's another group of individuals who are going to be the liberals, right? They're not liberal necessarily in the left-leaning sense, but at least in the sense of liberatory, right? Individual freedoms. And they're going to be the ones that are going to use the other logic. So I think you're going to have two different people coming at it from two different directions. So it's not like the same people are holding both positions, I don't think.
Well, I think they are.
Oh, really?
I mean, I'm pretty sure that the various human rights committees that have released statements have basically cited both these concerns. And I think the French Prime Minister even himself voiced both these concerns, I believe.
Okay.
It's to me, it seems like the same thing as Zizek once talked about, how the American discussion of immigration is always that immigrants are coming and they're taking our jobs, and they're so lazy that they're not doing anything and they're leeching off public services.
Yeah, of course.
Which it cannot be both of those things, because they are contradictions. Either they're more hardworking and that's the problem, or they're not hardworking enough and that's the problem.
Right. Okay, so
I guess we should address both those concerns, because they both seem ridiculous.
Right. Well, I don't know if the second one seems ridiculous, because...
Okay, I know what you're going to say. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because it seems as though the argument about self-domestication is a self-serialization in the Sartrean sense, right? So for Sartre, in the Critique of Dialectical Reason, what you have are external influences, external power structures, or religious logics, or political codings, your language system, your language game. The material mediations that determine our social relations are alienating under a capitalist system or within a religious system or whatever. And what we do is we appropriate them and we live them and we do self-domesticate. And it is a sort of ideological oppression or an ideological alienation or an ideological self-exploitation by taking the power structure that is imposed upon us from the outside, the transcendent, you must honor God by covering yourself, or you must honor your husband by covering yourself. And then you take that and you do appropriate that. And that is a self-domestication. That is a self-serialization in the Sartrean sense, which is alienating, isn't it?
Yeah, no doubt. Why I call it ridiculous is not because in any way I'm saying that that's not occurring, but the fact that that's ubiquitous. I mean, the very fact that we're wearing clothes right now,
sure,
even though we're inside, and the elements are not harsh as to sort of
Troy,
harm our genitals.
You know that I normally podcast naked. The only reason I'm wearing clothes right now is because
you're a fully liberatory individual. Yeah, Freud would have nothing to say to you. Right? You're already free.
Okay, so we actually talked about this months ago when I was in Scotland, and remember we kind of briefly touched on this, and you said something to the effect of, well, but the argument from the police officers who were telling this woman to uncover is exchanging one self-domestication for another self-domestication. So it's you take your ideological power structure, which is I need to cover up to please God or to please my husband or to honor myself in my relation with God or whatever it is. And okay, maybe that's not right. So what you need to do from the liberal perspective is what you need to do is you need to accept our understanding of freedom, which is just be naked and show those titties or whatever it is, right? Which again is going from one ditch to the other ditch. It's exchanging one exerial exploitative framework for another.
Yeah,
and that's not what I'm suggesting. That's what some people are suggesting.
Yeah.
That's what the cops were suggesting by telling that woman to uncover. But what I'm suggesting is burn the fucker down, right? Is let's be critical of both domains of power, both matrices of power, and be analytical and critical of both, recognizing that maybe one is more exploitative than the other, maybe not. How do we determine which one is more exploitative than other? In what way are either of these options exploitative? What are the underlying logics that determine how they're exploitative? And let's start unpacking those and let's start recreating all together. So the liberal, well, you need to free yourself and just show off your bodies and, go for the beach bod sort of thing, that has its own problems rooted in vanity, rooted in commercialization, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other side that is wedded to these transcendent ideas that I need to please God in order to save myself or based on some sort of bullshit metaphysical principles. So both are wrong.
Yeah, you're trading a religiously themed garb of the burqa for a secular burqa, in a sense.
Ooh.
Because...
Quote that, motherfuckers.
Yeah, exactly. France and Germany, or at least France especially, seems to have this understanding that the secular is a default position.
Right.
And you move in the secular whether you like it or not. And then you can either choose or not choose to move within your various religious communities. And then when those things conflict, the secular is the default. And so you have to go with that. And that just, the secular is as much a construction as anything else. And that point I think needs to be stressed, because then you fall into situations like this where you would think that someone wearing a burkini is somehow dangerous. You would hide weapons in backpacks as well as you could hide them in burqas. Probably
your
a lot
purse.
better.
Yeah.
I mean, the burqa does not make you any more capable of being dangerous than anybody else. And certainly the idea that it's oppressing women may in fact be true, but millions of things oppress women, and we do nothing about them. Not saying we should do nothing about them, but the idea of telling women what they can and cannot wear, how does this solve the problem? I mean, you see that South Park episode with the underpants gnomes? You familiar with that one?
Years ago, right?
Yeah, so there's these gnomes, and they collect underpants from people when they're sleeping.
Yeah.
And they go back to their little lair under the mountain or whatever it is, and they have a whiteboard, and it says, step 1, collect underpants. Step 2, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Step 3,
profit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is a meme now. And this is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Step 1, ban burqas. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, liberation.
Right.
Well, step 2 is pretty important. Like, how does banning the burqa make these women liberated?
Right.
There is no thought whatsoever to how this is the mechanism that makes this thing occur.
Okay.
Because they don't expect it to occur. Really, what it comes down to, it seems to me, the national conversation is assimilation is a problem, and people are pissed off about that. And that's the best part of the argument seems to be cultural assimilation is an issue, and people are kind of freaked out about it. And the burqa is a symbol of that assimilation since it's in public and it's so radically different than French secular culture. And then, of course, the worst of the argument is the strongest kind of Islamophobia. But I think we can all agree that that's obviously
just
terrible.
ridiculous. Yeah. And I think for me, it's important to note that those fears, those Islamic fears, they get into me too. Like, I don't want them to, but they do, you know? Just like when I'm in the middle of the ghetto, when I'm driving in South Central, I mean, I have certain stereotypes that come in and dictate my affective interpretation of the streets that I'm driving down and things like that. But I think for me, what's most important is always about minimizing the feelings and the logics and the actions that are rooted in any sort of restricting or limiting or limited kind of paradigm. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to figure out how to tease it out. It's I don't think it's necessarily horrible to have that fear, is my point, because it's something that is so prevalent in our cultures, the television shows that we watch, the conversations that we have, the images that we receive, that I think sometimes it's okay to receive that fear, but then I think it's really important to be self-critical of it. And so that's why I think it's always good to have a disposition where you are constantly aiming towards the tearing down of any sort of exploitative or alienating or oppressive type of thinking or acting. And so when those things do hit you, when you do see somebody walking down the street or walking into a coffee shop with a backpack, and they could be brown, white, orange, too much fake tan, I don't give a fuck, but if you see that, yeah, there's an instance of fear, but then to be self-aware and to be self-critical. What is this fear? Why am I feeling this fear? Where is this fear coming from? And is it a legitimate fear? And generally speaking, most of the time, the fears aren't legitimate. And I think with regards to this Islamophobic reaction to the burkini or the burqa bans and things like that, it's generally an illegitimate fear, if that makes any sense.
So you're saying like the good part of it would be, say, if you see a woman in a burqa, the natural altruistic feeling of, man, I really hope that she's not being forced to wear that, that's the feeling you're talking about. That would be a good thing to have.
I think that would actually be maybe an okay thing.
And then just kind of check that and say, well, you know what, she may do this for good religious reasons, and so I shouldn't just assume that she's powerless.
Sure, but then even then I would take it a step further, and I would still actually go to the critical level, and I would say ultimately, but this is just my bias, even though and this is the tension that I'm trying to work through, even though I espouse the ideas of religious freedom, I still would ultimately say that even if she does think that she's doing it for her own authentic faith, that ultimately she's still submitting herself to a transcendent, limited and limiting power structure, and she's appropriating that, and ultimately that's limiting her freedom.
Well, Austin, didn't you read Lacan in college? You were castrated from the moment you spoke a word. The moment you saw yourself in the mirror as a young boy.
Yeah, I'm fucked.
Yeah, I mean,
we're all fucked. Enjoy your symptom.
Yeah, we were set into those limiting power structures from the very beginning.
Exactly, and I'm okay with that. But that's the thing, is it's not like this black and white that you can be freed from all limiting power structures. And that's the thing that I think is so interesting about the critique of dialectical reason, at least how I read it, is that It's the idea of these domains of power structures that have the influence over us, or the domains of influence that our culture and religion and our political discourses have over us. And it's about seeking to minimize, to as great a degree as possible, the limited, exploitative, oppressive, alienating forces, and then seeking to maximize the affective, immediate, and more healthy, flourishing, mediatory social relations. And so that's why I think it's okay to feel that conflict on both of the prongs, both the fear of the person in the burqa or the fear of the person walking into the coffee shop with a backpack, and the sort of sympathy and sort of like, I hope that that person isn't being dominated and that person is actually authentically, joyfully doing this. I think that there's a contradiction and a tension to carry with both of those positions, but ultimately I think we need to be checking ourselves and making sure that the logic that is driving our analysis and our criticism and our affective presuppositions or a prioris in those situations is one that is ultimately not conditioned by too much, or that is not over-determined by our own sort of limited and limiting paradigms.
Yeah, I think the key that we're getting at here is as much as this battle of trying to figure out how to be free. Right? It's just a human condition, right? We're definitely not free, and we're trying to figure out how to be. The one way you're for sure not gonna solve that or make that happen is by the state coming in as an oppressor and making you free.
Yes.
That is certainly not gonna work, and in fact, It's gonna make things worse. And I think that's pretty clearly. I mean, can we agree that being the Sotrain that you are, and you're familiar with Fanon, this is a pretty colonial attitude, right?
Yes.
Coming in and telling the oppressed creature that I know what's better for you, and so I'm going to make you a free secular citizen.
That's
whether
Hobbes
you like it or not.
and Schmidt, right?
Yeah.
State violence. They're the ones who have the monopoly over violence. And that's why anything, whether it's state violence or the religious transcendent logic that is violence, that is controlling and restricting and retaining the flows, the vital flows of life, anything that does that whatsoever, we need to be constantly, perpetually antagonistic towards. Anything. And that's why the violence of Fanon is the good mediatory relationship. Because it's not violence necessarily, and I'm going to stick an ice pick in your eye, although he obviously did advocate that as well for the colonized. But it's also about, and I was listening to a podcast this week from the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research called The Podcast. What was it called?
Podcast for Social
Podcast for Social Research. Yeah, that's it. And this woman named Anjuli, I don't remember her last name, but she actually said that the idea of violent mediation in Fanon can also be understood in terms of the media relations understanding of mediations, which is communication. And Fanon talks about poetry. And that was one of the points that they made. And I actually tweeted to her and I said, I think that was actually a brilliant insight. And it's the idea that communication, that language, that poetry, that art, that discourse, in a Foucauldian sense, can also be antagonistic and violent. Because there's already a violence on us. There's a pre-existent violence that we are thrown into. We are always thrown into a situation of exploitation and alienation by the dominating serial, the dominating religious, social, political, cultural, yada, 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 the stuff that we always talk about, those power relations. We're thrown into those relations at all times. And so we're already victims of violence. So now it's about the perpetual state or the perpetual disposition of antagonism to that. And so that's why I don't love the idea. I don't want to be like an advocate of the Burkini, if that makes sense. You know? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, because I do want to be an advocate for religious freedom, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I agree with you that that it's also problematic to go down the classic liberal line of religious liberty as the endpoint. I mean, this attitude of looking down upon the oppressed colonial object and then seeking its betterment through your own means. This is not just Hobbes and Schmidt, right? The more centralized power, sort of dynamics represented by their philosophies, but even in John Stuart Mill, right, on liberty, we talk about this a lot, and talking about positive, negative liberty and conceptions of justice. From Mill and on liberty, he talks about we got to have this religion, for instance, would be and freedom of choice and all these things, and conscience and pursuits would all be freedoms given to everybody, and the only thing that's disallowed is harming one another, which would be taking away one of those liberties. But then, of course, he says, but this only counts for civilized peoples. And so Mill was an advocate for British rule in India, because he argued that the Indian people were not civilized, and so they did not get to have these same liberties that the British did. So the British had the rights to colonialism, essentially, right? So Mill's so afraid of the tyranny of the majority, right? Where the majority gangs up the minority and defines for them what is and is not okay, and that curbs liberties. But then who decides who's civilized and who's not civilized? The majority.
We
right?
do, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So-
the power structures do.
So that it
Yeah.
comes right back on himself. There's almost no way for him to get around that. And so it's not just an accidental feature. In liberalism itself is baked into it this idea that there are haves and have-nots in terms of liberty. There is no conception within liberalism that's ever been about everybody having these liberties, because the majority will always deem certain people to be too dangerous to have these liberties for whatever reason. And if we're going to rethink these conceptions of freedom and allowing people to free themselves from these power structures in whatever way it is, and even communally doing it together, it's going to have to be away from classical liberalism.
That's right. This is actually really important. This is an historical point that's really important to make. Liberalism was a response to the division between the monarchy and sort of plebs, right? And so liberals came around. Well, really, it was about landowners. The landowners didn't own the property or the product of their own work. So that was John Locke, one of his big criticisms, right? As a classical economic thinker, that was one of the things he argued is that landowners, they're the ones who actually work the land and stuff like that, so they should own the product of their own hands. The problem so then they fight against the monarchy and they give power to the landowners. There was everybody else who didn't own land that was ignored. And so that's the other class division that gets inaugurated with the inauguration of liberalism. So liberalism is the removal of one power dynamic in favor of another power dynamic. And you could say it's almost like the gap, and my hands are really far apart right now, the gap between the monarchy and everybody else is really wide. And then liberalism did lessen the gap a little bit. The bar came down a little bit. So the gap maybe wasn't as wide, to use a visual metaphor. Not that qualitatively it wasn't still a huge gap, but we'll say quantitatively, the hierarchy was flattened a little bit, but nevertheless, there's still a division. And then this, of course, is where Marxist criticism comes in. He says, hey, look, capitalism still had some great uses, and the economic relations that affected the social relations in the shift from mercantilism and feudalism to capitalism were good in some ways, but nevertheless, there's still a class division. And those class divisions don't just affect economic systems, but they also affect social and religious relations as well. So liberalism as a system historically is on the way to closing the gap of the divisions, but nevertheless it still retains the divisions. The problem is that it's more subversive, because what it does is it forces everybody to embrace this idea, this ethos, and so it ultimately does become tyrannical. And so qualitatively there's still a radical degree of exploitation and alienation and oppression that is embedded within liberalism as we appropriate it. And then that's the problem with this issue, is that we self-domesticate.
Yeah, and that historical and structural analysis that Marxism tries to understand things in that vein, and we're hopefully trying to do the same thing. The idea of banning the burqa is not historically and structurally informed, right? Here's a symptom of a problem, at least they think it's a symptom, and if we get rid of the symptom in some way, that will symbolically end the disease, whatever that disease might be, and that's obviously only going to make things worse. There's no sense in which you are liberating anybody or sort of retracting the additions that the fundamentalist strains of Islam have made by doing this. That this is 130 or so years in the making through colonialism, and the historical circumstances in the Middle East and in Persia have helped create, along with the obviously choice of certain not great people within those communities, to make this situation. And
Right.
banning the burqa is certainly not going to reverse that.
No, and I just had this thought. It seems that as much as the liberal mentality tries to act as though it's progressive, it's really not, because they're using an 18th century logic in order to dictate how to function in the 21st century, whereas we should be using a sort of more forward-looking approach and a genuine progressive, not progressive in the way that liberals like to talk about it, because it's not progressive at all. They're using this liberal logic, the idea, you said it a minute ago, of aiming towards religious freedom as the end goal. Religious freedom isn't the end goal, especially from a Marxian theoretical perspective. Religious liberty, or was that religious liberty? Yeah, I guess religious liberty and the critique of religion is the starting point for Marx. That's where you start, and you move through that, and you get beyond that shit until there are no hierarchies anymore. And that would be a truly progressive disposition or outlook.
Yeah, it's much more long-term way of thinking.
Yeah.
You're not going to assimilate everybody immediately. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you take a long-term look at, which historical circumstances helped create this issue and helped move or have all this emigration occur into France and Germany and the rest of Europe, and then what about that is then creating these schisms amongst people in different communities and causing these problems. Even, the bad things like the Islamophobia, this are still caused by structural circumstances. Then maybe you can help alleviate those things by getting rid of or removing those structural impediments to assimilation. But that's not a discussion that politicians are ready to have, because they're not things that they can solve within their 4 or whatever year terms. They can achieve banning things in a day. Like, was it Sarkozy said that he would immediately ban?
Yeah, apparently the Rat Man. Isn't that what Beju calls him? The Rat Man or something like that?
Apparently his book didn't work if he's running again.
La Rata? Or I don't know, that was Spanish, not... That's not rat in Spanish, but my accent, I was like trying to do a French word in Spanish. El rato. But I think Beju called Sarkozy the Rat Man. Or was that?
Like Freud's Rat Man?
No, like he's a rat.
Oh, like he's a man that is a rat.
I don't know if like he looks like a rat or if just because he is rat in his characteristics. I don't know.
We're dangerously close to Francophobia.
Hey, I mean, I love France. I love France. I actually am probably a sort of Francophile.
Yeah, Francophilia.
I have Francophilia.
Or does that mean you love Frank Ocean?
I do like Frank Ocean and James Franco.
Yeah. I think you are James Franco. We talked about this.
I used to have a shirt that the Kim gave me a long time ago, and it said WWJFD. What would James Franco do? Yeah.
Smoke a blunt. That's what he would do pretty much always.
And write. And then make out with dudes.
Get into Yale. Was it Yale?
He got into Yale and fell asleep in class. I love you, James Franco. If you're listening, call me. Let's hang out. Let's write some plays together.
Let's look at each other in the mirror.
And then we'll take selfies of each other. Let's look at each other in the mirror. Oh, Jesus. But, yeah, so apparently Sarkozy is going to run for president again, which I just found out about an hour ago. And I didn't even know that was possible. And I can't even believe that would even be an option. I can't, but anyway. But
Teddy Roosevelt did it, right?
How many years apart was he?
I think it was like one term.
Was it one term? And then he just came back and was like, fuck it, I'm going to do a second term.
Thing. And then, the third party thing and everything. Yeah, so that didn't work out so well.
So, yeah, he said that he wants to institute a national ban on the Burkini. So what do we do, though, then, moving forward? So we want to be critical, and we want to obviously aim towards human liberation in a genuine sense, in a real sense, not exchanging one power structure for another, exchanging a 13th century or 12th century or 7th century idea for an 18th century idea. We don't want to do that. We want to literally seek a delimited understanding of human liberatory freedom. So this kind of reminds me of the sort of Spinozistic idea of we're not yet aware of what the body can do, and this outlook of we're not even aware yet of what it means to be human. We're not even aware of what it means to be free. We're not even aware of what it means to have genuine freedom in our social and political relations. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Spinoza's concept of blessedness is kind of a one-size-fits-all, not one-size-fits-all, but it's a cure-all. For these issues, and it doesn't mean that it's simple. It's certainly complicated, but that is the ultimate goal, is this kind of freedom where altruism becomes entirely natural, and no one else has any need to oppress anybody else or limit anyone else's freedom. That's certainly the goal, and I think the what we may figure out through discussion of this in this historical period and event is it's not going to come through making people take their clothes off in public. So if we're going to actually achieve these goals or seek to achieve them, it's going to come through dialogue. It's going to come through mutual understanding of the other and through checking your privilege, or I guess it's one way of saying what you were saying before in terms of checking your own biases and assumptions in thinking, even while admitting that there may be good reasons to have those intuitions. And that level of humility, at the very least, can begin this process. It's not going to end it. It's going to be a long-term thing, but
yeah, I mean centuries long.
Yeah, I mean it took centuries to occur,
Right.
and so it's going to take a long ass time.
Do we have the patience
solve.
for that in the 21st century, where everything is so immediate and so quick?
Of course not.
Oh, great. So now we're just fucking cynics again.
Well, it's not going to happen. I mean, Spinoza was laughing when he was writing Book 5 of the Ethics, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, this is ever going to happen. But I think we should at least just try to have those conversations. And that's, at the very least, doing that instead of, trying to figure out what should we ban.
You don't think it's ever going to happen?
I mean, maybe when the aliens come down and make it happen. But
no, they're mega capitalists. Remember, we already discussed this.
I still believe they're socialists.
Well, we'll find out. Let's hope so.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I am such an optimist that I do think it's going to happen. I'm not one of the people that looks at the political and social global landscape and is like, yeah, things are progressively getting better, even though in some ways I do see some notions of progress, obviously. It's
better angels of our nature thing.
Exactly. But I do think, like we were talking today, the wonder of the sharing economy. Not that I'm putting all my hope in technology. I'm not, going full on Marshall McLuhan here. Or was he an optimist, or was he just kind of tools or the extension of ourselves?
I thought McLuhan was a pessimist.
Oh, was he a pessimist?
I don't remember.
He was a cynic or a critic, but well, definitely, I'm not a techno optimist like Kevin Kelly. I'm reading a really good book by Kevin Kelly. Actually, he's a techno optimist for sure. He's one of the co-founders of Wired, and I do think that there are going to be some amazing things that technology are going to bring, and certain elements of human recreation. That's what I think maybe is a better term. Instead of human liberation, even though that's a nice term, it's human recreation, which seems more radical. Because liberation seems to carry that positive element that falls from one negative ditch to another ditch, right? Isaiah Berlin's notion of positive liberty that people are so afraid of. You have the thing that you're running from and then the thing you're running to, and liberation often seems to imply something that you're running to, which a lot of times people are afraid of, which I can understand. But if we talk about recreation, perpetual revolution, perpetual recreation, maybe that's a better motif to guide our disposition. And that's what I think I'm more interested in. It's about, I sound like a broken record, I feel like, even to myself, because it's always about our positioning of ourselves in antagonism to the dominating power structures that we always find ourselves immersed in. That's it, for me. That's my starting point, is let's always just check ourselves and make sure that we are perpetually in a relation of distance to violence, the violence that precedes us. And then, obviously, our distancing from that is a violence in its own sense, whether it's physical violence or discursive violence or poetic violence or whatever. And I think that's I think, what's important.
Yeah, it's interesting. This actually has some import into last week's discussion. Is we were talking about how the whole controversy with the Burkini and banning the burqa and religious freedom, what does that mean in the secular state, doesn't have as much import into American discourse and conversation. But the whole safe spaces thing is somewhat similar in a bit of idea. I was coming from different circles, but the idea of some students calling for banning free speech in some areas, and then universities talking about, well, what does free speech look like in a secular university where no one's supposed to be given any more power than another as far as social status. And this is a difficult discussion and all this, but there's some similar themes, right? We're talking about last week the ability to recreate oneself, and that college is supposed to be the setting where you are given the
2
tools.
weeks ago. Last week was brolosophy.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago,
yeah,
we're talking about that. How you're supposed to be given the tools to recreate yourself and to question both the power structures that are without you and those that are within you in terms of your own beliefs and biases and whatnot. And so that is kind of a similar idea, because the debate between safe spaces advocates and those who are criticizing them tends to be one about, wussy kids who can't take themselves being questioned.
Right.
Versus people who, certainly feel like they should have some level of freedom that they're not being given or not being afforded against others who are afforded it, and there's inequality inherent in that. And I think we could say we maybe side with one a little bit more than the other, but the whole dynamic seems flawed. Like they're both reaching for a conception of liberty and freedom, which is ultimately just ineffective and flawed, and based on these classical liberal notions, which aren't actually freeing. They're just putting on the new secular burqa. And so we want to posit a different kind of freedom as a goal. And that's one where we don't know exactly what it is yet. But the process involves breaking down the structures without you and within you and building up something new together in a way that's non-hierarchical and hopefully in some way allows people to engage in some level of freedom we hitherto have not sort of engaged upon yet.
Yeah, that's really nice. I actually think that's beautiful. So we can probably sum up there. What do you think? Parting shots, parting words of wisdom? What do we do? How do we approach this Burkini, burqa, Sharia law, religious freedom issue?
My final thought is I think the hijab is kind of hot. All right, so our next segment is the sticky leaves. This is where one of us gives a recommendation for how to convince yourself not to shoot yourself today. In the words of Albert Camus.
Yeah, it's too many literary references. You keep bouncing around here. You're inconsistent. You're Russian and then you're French Algerian. Make up your damn mind, dude.
This is how you do it in the academy.
That's right. Yeah, so I keep bouncing around. I even came up with another sticky leaf moments ago that I was like, you know what, I could talk about that even, because that kind of was really intriguing and made me value the wet dew on a Sunday morning or whatever morning this is. But I'm going to stick with my original one because it's something that has weighed on my heart for some time. Basically, earlier I was driving in my vehicle and I was in Orange County going to visit T. Roy in the Valley to do the podcast, and I was in a parking lot and after I got my coffee, and I was going, like 5-7 miles an hour, and there was this young woman in the middle of the street with an old dude, like 80 years old, hunched back, barely able to walk, using one of those walker things that has the little seat thing on it,
With the tennis balls in the bottom?
Yeah, one of those guys. And he was walking, and she's helping him across the street. And they stopped when they saw me, and I was like, motioned with my hand. I was like, no, go. And they insisted that I went, so I was like, are you sure? Okay. So I kind of drove by, and my window was down, and as I did, I was like, hey, have a lovely day. And they were like, thank you. And the guy's face lit up. He was super cute, super old, man. And I kind of thought to myself, I was like, man, like literally, that guy could die any second. And not in a morbid or like mean sense.
That's not morbid at all.
But like genuinely, I was like, that guy's life. I mean, he's lived a full life. And literally, if he passed away in his sleep tonight, it's not like it would be surprising. Whereas if you get a phone call tomorrow and you're like, hey, Austin died in his sleep last night, that would be like, what the hell? He's young, man. How did he die? But this guy, you're like, hey, he's lived a full life. He's there, And I've started to kind of been thinking about that a lot more lately. But really, one of the things that I think is so interesting is the idea of agedness and of history. That is something that in America and in the West in particular, in the West and in America in particular, that we do not value, and that old people tend to really have no place in our society. And I think there's something catastrophically wrong with a society that doesn't appreciate history and that doesn't appreciate the aged within their community. And this is actually something that I first started thinking about when I was an undergrad reading Stanley Hauerwas, who wrote this book, something about hope. Do you know was it Inventing Hope or something like that?
Yeah, I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
Something about hope.
The title.
Yeah, and he had an essay in it where he talked about this, and it was really the first time that I kind of started to pay attention to this. And since then, my ideas on it have even morphed more critical towards finding fault in the market logic that dominates under a capitalist system where everything has to be fast, everything has to be young, everything has to be new, everything has to be efficient, because it's ultimately about driving profits. And what drives profits? Speed, youth, and efficiency, and novelty, right? Old and patience and wisdom and experience aren't as important. And those things get pushed to the periphery more and more and more, especially things that are slower. And as our bodies break down and as we get older, we get slower. And I think that there's something beautiful about aging and slowing down that we could really appreciate from. And I don't know, I think that sometimes just hanging out with old people and listening to them and trying to build communities where the aged have a place within that community, I think that there's something really valuable about that. And if you look at like ancient cultures, right, they always had the wise within in their midst. They were the ones that passed down the stories, the oral traditions, and the religious traditions and the cultural traditions. They were the chiefs, or they were the soothsayers, or whatever it was within their communal orderings. And I think that there's something valuable about that, and I love it. I don't know. I think it's great. I like old people. I like old people. I like old things. I like old stuff. I grew up. My parents are all about antiques and shit. So maybe that's part of the reason that I'm in a house right now. I'm house sitting for my dad. I'm in a house right this second where I'm staying in a house where it was built in like 1912. You know, which isn't old by world standards, but for California, that's old.
Yeah, you compare American culture with, Southeastern Asian cultures where Theravada Buddhism is still dominant, and it's such a vastly different enterprise in terms of what's celebrated and what's magnified on the cultural scene, as far as where knowledge is supposed to be attained, right? Not in the market or in some abstract principle like that, but actual human beings who have done certain work, who have removed themselves from society, and that itself is what sort of propagates wisdom. Now there are political, issues with that, obviously, but
right.
It's certainly a nice comparative.
Yeah. Well, this actually fits to something you mentioned, I think, in the last podcast, too, where you talked about the power of philosophy is that it's precisely not monetizable. And this is, I think, hitting on a similar range of ideas, that this is the non-monetizable wisdom. You can't really monetize wisdom. Or as soon as you do, it doesn't become wisdom anymore. It becomes something else. It becomes knowledge, right? Or it becomes information science, right?
Yeah, it's a commodity.
Exactly. Yeah. But true wisdom and true experience and true moral, ethical, communal guidance, that's stuff that you can't really monetize, at least not in a way that will allow it to keep that level of purity. I think that I find so beautiful about agedness. And I don't know, it just sucks, man. The people that we have in our community, especially in the United States, I see more so, that are old, they get pushed to the periphery. We stick them in old folks' homes because they're a burden, because they can't contribute to the marketplace anymore. So they don't really work. They don't really fit in our society. So we stick them in old folks' home, or you have Grandpa Joe who's, at the dinner table, who's kind of, oh, well, here's crazy Grandpa Joe, going off on one of his rants again, talking about Jimmy Carter or talking about Kennedy or whatever it is, talking about the good old days. And it's like, oh, you're cute. And that's so fucking demeaning, man. This is someone who has wisdom in life and years. Maybe they fought in the war. Maybe they protested. Maybe they were walking the streets with Zinn or Martin Luther King or, Stokely Carmichael or something. Who knows? I mean,
maybe they wore the hood in the 30s.
Hopefully not. And if they...
That's the problem, though, right? As soon as you start talking about agedness equaling wisdom and experience, everyone's like, yeah, but like half the old people I know are all just blithering racists.
Mm-hmm.
And then you feel like, what am I really going to get from that? Agedness just equals ignorance.
Right.
I think that's kind of the common trope you hear, right?
Yeah.
You compare that to Socrates, who's 70-something years old, right? And every young bachelor in Athens just wants to turn him around and sleep with them.
Yeah. Literally turn him around.
Yeah, literally. Alcibiades is like, the Brad Pitt of the ancient world. And he is making it his life's mission to seduce Socrates. And Socrates is just like, nah.
Dude,
not having that
I'm
shit.
casting a movie. Ian McKellen as Socrates and Brad Pitt as Alcibiades. We're doing this, man.
It would have to be Ryan Gosling because he's got to be younger
Oh,
now.
that's right. Okay, Gosling. That's cool.
Brokeback Mountain 2.
That's
With
yes.
that shit.
I dig
So
it.
basically, what we're arguing is we need more sexy grandpas.
We need more sexy grandpas, like Johnny Knoxville in Bad Grandpa, right? Old dude in prosthetics, but he's got a six pack underneath.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we got to reference that scene though, right?
Which one?
When he gets his dick stuck in the vending machine. I watched that movie with my mom.
Okay. Why would you ever? Did you not know ahead of time that this was the dudes from Jackass? You didn't know it was the dudes from Jackass?
Well, yeah, I knew that, but I didn't know that was going to happen.
Bro, that was enough. That would have been enough for me. I wouldn't have been like, "Hey, Aunt Debbie, you want to go see guys from Jackass?" Jesus.
Oh, the problem is my cousin works for Jackass, so
Oh, that's right.
we all went to see it together.
Isn't there another scene where he's got workout shorts on and they're really short and his ball sack is hanging out?
Oh, yep.
That's so ridiculous. Hey man, but he was integrated into society, right? He was like that weird crazy grandpa, but at least he wasn't like some novelty item. He was in it, man. That was actually a really touching film. I actually kind of enjoyed the film. It actually had a really, interesting sort of Homeric Odyssey element to it, where it's like these two people go on a journey and it's wisdom and then youth coming together. And I know, of course, there's all this stupid hijinks and whatnot, but there was something kind of funny about it and interesting that had a little bit more depth. I might have to review that on my movie podcast.
Can I say that's the most Austin Schmidt thing I've ever heard in my life? Why a Jackass movie is actually beautifully tragic.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. But so kind of going back to the old person thing, too. I mean, with Socrates, in his day and age, though, they were in a community where older people were valued. And so not only did the community value them, but they themselves felt valued. Whereas here, people are ostracized. The old people themselves, they appropriate their alienation. And so over centuries, they just live their displacement.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about, this is an interesting analog to the colonialism topic we're talking about before. When you oppress a group of people for a long time and you devalue them and you consider them less than human, don't be surprised when they come back fundamentalist.
That's a good point.
Right? And that you don't know how to solve that problem at that point. And
That's a good point.
Old people kind of have the same deal, right? They come back racist because they've been devalued, and this is sort of their only way to assert their own individuality. Is by saying things that are shocking or beliefs that are shocking against the status quo, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think there's something beautiful about age. I think there's something wonderful about getting old. Not that I'm rushing in any way to die or to get old. I don't want to, but but at the same time, I think that there's something valuable about it that we miss, and I think it's beautiful. So that's my sticky leaves for the day: is go out and hug an old person, and let's figure out ways that we can create a society where we better value the wisdom of the aged. That we start to value the wisdom of the aged, not that we start to value our grandpa's old racist KKK stories. Yeah. So, for bullshitting this week, we are going to discuss the phenomenon, the meme that has become material holiday praxis, National Dog Day. Troy, I know that you love yourself some dog action. I mean, not some dog action, but...
Whoa.
but, some dog loving. Wait, no, I mean, not some dog loving. You appreciate some dog stuff. Not like some doggy style stuff. You know what I'm saying. You know what I mean, man.
At this point, I don't know what you're saying.
I know you're down with that dog shit. That dog life.
Yeah, dog life. There we go.
Dog life.
Yeah, I like me some dogs.
Yeah, you like
I
some
don't have a
dogs.
dog right now, though, so that's kind of a bummer. But, yeah, dogs are awesome. Here's the thing, though. National Dog Day. I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way.
Why?
I'm not really seeing it. I feel like every day is National Dog Day, since National Dog Day basically means put pictures on the internet of your dog doing funny shit.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I'm not against that. I like dogs doing funny shit.
Yes.
But that's literally every day. Mm-hmm. What's different about National Dog Day?
Well, National Dog Day is a day where everything else on the internet shuts down. So that if there's no cats, there are no funny birds swearing to rock music. Have you seen that? Have you seen that? The parrot that's like, fucking. It's brilliant, dude. But yeah, none of that. It's only dogs. That's what it is. Every day is. It's like the exceptional. I don't even remember what's the logical principle where it's like.
The constitutive exception.
That's what I was thinking. The constitutive exception is that. Yeah, this is kind of it. This is the singular day by which all other days are measured. This is the day of heightened intensity. This is the day of unique dogness. This is the metaphysical principle, the ideal from which all memes derive.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's pretty analogous to that thing you were talking about last week with MLK. You know, give him a day, celebrate the peaceful, nice, loving side of it, and then forget about anti-war, forget about anti-poverty. You know, film your dog, make it into a GIF of him dancing on two legs, and then, you know, forget about selective inbreeding causing massive suffering to half the species in the world. Just cover over that shit.
I think we cover over that shit anyway.
Yeah, this seems
really
to help
talk
even
about,
more, though, right?
Yeah, of course. So how are we supposed to have enjoyment on a regular basis of dogs, knowing the dark underbelly of dog breeding, how they're just our little fucked up Frankenstein monsters that we use for our own enjoyment? Like, you know, pugs whose eyeballs pop out of their heads, and chihuahuas who shiver because they have the wrong nervous system, and they were literally bred for, like, little fucking snacks. Like, how are we supposed to appreciate dogs?
Yeah, I mean, we're not supposed to. They're supposed to, you know, revolution. You ever seen that movie, White God?
No.
Oh, it's a great movie. I think it was like a Polish or something like that. And it's a movie about, it's live action. It's not animated or anything. It's about dogs' revolution over human beings with real dogs in the movie. And they're not like talking dogs or shit like that. It's like a real, like, R-rated drama, dogs engaging in revolution against humans. It's great. That's what should happen. That should be National Dog Day. It's them celebrating the past revolution.
So White God, it's about, it's not anthropomorphized, like Homeward Bound shit where dogs are talking. It's just literally dogs running in the street.
Dude, Homeward Bound is like the most seditious, ugly thing, right? It's like, oh, we love our slavery so much, we will go through basically the peaks and valleys of Hades in order to get back to our masters.
That's right.
White God is the exact opposite of that. It's like, fuck that revolution.
Fuck that revolution. We want to be rabies-infected beings. Let us go.
Yeah, great.
What about White Fang? White Fang is about a wolf that builds a partnership from the bottom up, not from the top down. A bottom-up, genuine, empathic partnership with a frontierman.
I think I read that when I was like in elementary school. That was like
Jack
a school
London.
book, right?
Jack London, baby.
I thought Jack London was Call to the Wild.
He may have done that as well.
Wolves are just his thing then?
I think so. He also did The Iron Heel, which is actually a really good socialist piece of literature. Actually, really, really, really good book. That's a sticky leaf for you. Check out The Iron Heel by Jack London. But yeah, White Fang, I'm pretty sure it was Jack London.
Yeah, there's a string of revolutionary literature having to do with canines.
Well, this is like a wolf and a dude that build a bond, right? Is that cool? Can we do that with dogs?
Yeah, I can see that. Build the Internationale.
Yeah,
for dogs.
Exactly. Well, fuck it. Fuck International Dog Day or National... Is it International Dog Day?
I think it's just National Dog Day. So yeah, only American dogs count, of course.
Only American dogs count, right? Not all dogs don't matter.
If your dog doesn't stand up during the national anthem, then I guess it's fuck that dog too.
Did you see the video of that pole vaulter that was doing... I showed you that video, right? That he's running and the national anthem... He's going to do his thing at the Olympics and he hears the national anthem from some other medal award ceremony. He stops mid-stride.
Yeah, it's like a dog when they're at home and you're talking to them over the answering machine. And they're freaking the hell out trying to find you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it hears your voice. That's exactly... Oh my god, dude. That is a perfect analogy. So, what do we say then about National Dog Day? Good, bad, indifferent, and ugly.
Well, we're bullshit, so I guess we're just saying fuck it.
Fuck it. I feel like that's what we end up always saying about anything.
Well, we're bullshitting, so we can't have like a reasoned, rational, considered, nuanced response.
All right, so fuck National Dog Day. Fuck all those memes. Don't do it, or do it. Just realize that when you're doing it,
you're horrible.
You're fucking, yeah.
First class leg room, 3 cocktails for everyone, and a
right, so normally at this point in the episode, we would kick it over to Michael, who would do This Week in Hip Hop. But Michael is currently somewhere over the Atlantic, or maybe he is somewhere in London. I'm not sure where he is. He could be in, where do the hobbits live? Somewhere in
Shire?
The Shire, the Hobbit Shire. He could be somewhere. He's somewhere green. He's definitely somewhere greener than he has been for the past month or however long he was in Los Angeles. But
yeah, LA is Mordor, right?
Yeah, basically, especially for you today, right? It was 105. So, but yeah. So we will be releasing This Week in Hip Hop tomorrow, as soon as Michael has the time to actually to kind of sit down and do his episode. So don't worry, This Week in Hip Hop is coming. It's just not going to be embedded within the podcast. But then next week, everything will be back to normal. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Yep, remember, you can check us out on Instagram and on Twitter. Our handle is owls_at_dawn. And please, if you enjoyed the show, go on iTunes, look us up, drop us a review, give us a 5-star rating, whatever you can do. We'd really appreciate it.
And if you hate listen to us, then send email to Troy, or you can call him at 8675309.
Call me, bitches. I want to hear about it. До свидания, Amerikanski.